My wife's friends convinced her to fake a breakup test. My response made her flee in embarrassment. Wrong husband to test, girls. Hairzinkel length hair. It started on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where everything feels like it's moving in slow motion. The sun barely made. Hidden behind an appearance. Main thick clouds casting a soft, gray light over everything. I was just about to call it a day, when I got the message from Sarah, my wife, asking if I could come home early. We hadn't had one of those lazy evenings in a while, and I thought it'd be nice to surprise her. She had been swamped with work, and I knew she needed a break. I walked in through the door, expecting the usual warm welcome, but the house felt different. The air was heavier, more tense, like something was about to break. The front door was ajar, just a little, letting the cold breeze sneak inside. The TV was on in the living room, its dim glow flickering in the hallway. It wasn't loud enough to drown out the quiet sounds of someone talking, but it was enough to make the house feel strange. I froze halfway up the stairs, my hand still resting on the banister. I didn't recognize the voices. One was Sarah's, of course, but the others, they were unfamiliar. One voice was deep, almost forceful. Then I heard Sarah laugh softly, but it was different, too sharp, too tense. A knot began to form in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I hesitated for a moment before I leaned in a little closer, trying to hear better. That's when I heard it. A name. My name. "Do it, man," said a voice that made me feel uneasy, like I'd heard it before, but couldn't place it. Fake the breakup. Test her. See how she reacts. If she's really in it, she'll fall apart. That's when you know. The words hit me like a punch in the gut, but I couldn't move. I couldn't pull myself away. My mind was racing. Sarah's friends. Carson. Eddie. I didn't need to hear more. The idea was clear. But I didn't want to believe it. Fake a breakup. Test her loyalty. This was a joke, right? But then I heard Jackson's voice, and it stopped me dead in my tracks. He was the one who pushed it further, who suggested that they stretch it out, make it last for weeks. Test her for a month. See if she'll beg for you back, he said, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick now, suffocating me. My mind screamed at me to leave, to confront them, but I couldn't move. I was stuck in that moment. And then it hit me. Harder than I ever expected. This wasn't just a joke. This wasn't some casual conversation. Mason was going to test me. My husband, the man I trusted. He was going to test my loyalty like I was some experiment. Some lab rat to prove a point. I felt something inside me break. Not in a dramatic, tearful way, but in a slow, steady unraveling. Each woman in his family had ankle-length hair. It was like stepping into a cold shower without warning, the shock hitting you all at once, taking your breath away. I wanted to burst in there, to confront him, to demand an explanation. But something held me back. What good would that do? He was already too deep into it, wasn't he? I pulled away from the hallway, moving carefully, silently. The world around me seemed to slow down, each step heavier than the last. I walked to the bedroom, closed the door behind me, and let the silence take over. I needed to think. I needed to process this. What was I supposed to do now? Did he think I would beg, cry, plead for him to stay? In his family had ankle-length hair. Did he really think he could manipulate me into some sort of emotional breakdown and prove how much I loved him? How could he do this? How could he be so blind? But as I sat there, the questions started to form, clearer than before. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. And I sure as hell wasn't going to play along with this twisted game. Hadn't had enough of being a pawn in other people's games. I'd had enough of being manipulated. My loyalty being tested like I was some object to be measured. I wasn't going to crumble like he thought I would. I wasn't going to react the way they expected. If Mason wanted to test me, I'd show him exactly who he was testing. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me. And I wasn't going to play by anyone else's rules. I took a deep breath, staring at my reflection in the mirror. It was time for me to take control. I thought I had imagined it. The words kept circling in my mind, replaying over and over, like a broken record. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't some twisted joke. My husband, Mason, the man I had spent years building a life with, had allowed himself to be dragged into something dark. His friends had convinced him that testing my loyalty was a game, something to prove whether or not I was worthy of his love. Each one like length in hair. That the deeper I went into it, the clearer it became. He was more than just a pawn in this messed up game. He was an active player. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing. Mason was sleeping beside me, his breath steady and calm, unaware of what I had discovered. I knew he was still caught up in the idea of proving something, still convinced that testing my loyalty would be the answer to whatever doubts he had. But what hit me the hardest wasn't just the betrayal of hearing his friends discuss me like a test subject. The fact that Mason had chosen to go along with it. He could have stopped, could have said no, but instead, he agreed. He chose to let them manipulate him. He chose to let them manipulate me. In the morning, things felt different. I could feel the shift in the air between us, like a tightrope being stretched. The tension so palpable I could barely breathe. Mason was trying to act normal, but his gestures were stilted. The way he moved. The way he glanced at me, like he was waiting for something. In his family had ankle-length hair. I could feel him rehearsing the lines in his head, trying to decide when and how to deliver the breakup he had so carefully planned. But I wasn't going to make this easy for him. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. At breakfast, we didn't talk much. I could tell he was waiting for me to ask him about his night, to press for answers, but I stayed silent. I just watched him. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, as though he were waiting for the perfect moment to drop the bomb. But I wasn't going to let him dictate the terms. I wasn't going to let him test me. Not now. Not ever. I spent the rest of the day trying to stay calm, trying to keep my emotions in check. There. But every time I saw him, every time he looked at me with that hesitant expression, it cut deeper. It would want ankle path hair. It wasn't the idea of a breakup that hurt. It was the fact that he had let someone else decide for us. That he had let himself be swayed by their words. He didn't trust me enough to have a real conversation. He thought I needed to be tested. By the time I walked through the door that evening, I was exhausted. Not from work but from the weight of the situation. I had been playing it cool, keeping my emotions in check. But inside, I was burning. How could he do this to us? To me? Our ankler. The memories of our time together started flooding in. The good ones. Y'all had the ones. And it built us into what I thought was a solid partnership. And yet here he was, preparing to rip it all apart. He didn't even know who I was anymore. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just about a test. This was about control. Mason wasn't testing my loyalty, because he was unsure of my love. He was testing me. Because he needed to feel powerful. He needed to feel like he had control over the situation. Over me. And I wasn't going to let him. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror that evening, looking at my reflection, trying to steady my breathing. There was no crying. There was no begging. If he wanted to test me, fine. But he wasn't going to get the reaction he expected. He wasn't going to see me fall apart. He was going to soot. He was going to see something else. He was going to see the woman who wasn't going to play along. The woman who had nothing to prove. I went to bed that night with a quiet resolve. I wasn't going to play his game. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to wait. I was going to watch. And when he finally showed his hand, when the test came, I would be ready. This wasn't just about my love for him. This was about my own self-respect. My ability to stand firm in the face of his manipulation. Mason thought he was going to measure my love. Each woman in his family had ankle-length hair. But what he didn't know was that I was about to measure his integrity. And if he thought he could manipulate me into proving my worth, he was in for a rude awakening. The next few days were a blur. But one thing was clear. Mason was trying to play his part in the game. And I was watching him closely. Waiting for him to slip up. It was as if everything had shifted. And I was no longer just the wife he loved. Now I was a character. In a script he had to follow. A test subject. A prize to be won or lost. And the worst part. He didn't even realize it yet. He thought he was in control. But I knew better. At breakfast, he tried to act normal. He kept glancing at me, waiting for a sign, waiting for me to do something. But I didn't. I just sat there, sipping my coffee. Staring out the window, as if everything was fine. It wasn't. I knew he had something planned. Ankle-length hair. I could feel it in the way he avoided my eyes, the way he kept shifting in his seat. Every time he moved. I could almost hear him, mentally, rehearsing the lines he had learned from his friends. He was trying to figure out how to say it. How to make it feel real. He didn't want to fail the test. The tension was thick between us, but I didn't give him anything to work with. I didn't react when he asked me about my day. I didn't flinch when he paused, as if waiting for me to break down. Nothing. I stayed calm, steady. Later that evening, I saw it. The moment he was preparing for. The moment when he would finally take the leap. We were sitting in the living room. His family had ankle-length hair. The soft glow of the lamp, casting long shadows across the room. Mason was fidgeting with his phone, pretending to scroll through something. I knew he wasn't really paying attention. I knew he was just waiting for the moment when he could pull the trigger. And then, it happened. He cleared his throat, looked up at me, and said, "We need to talk." His voice was too steady, too controlled. It was the kind of tone someone uses when they've rehearsed what they're about to say 1,000 times. I put down my book, meeting his eyes without hesitation. "What about?" I think we need some space," he said, his words carefully measured. "I don't know if this marriage is working. Maybe we should take a break." I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, looking at him. Feeling his words hit me like a soft breeze. He was waiting for me to beg. To plead with him not to leave. To prove to him that I still cared. But instead, I gave him nothing. That's what you think is best, I said softly. Then, I respect that. I saw the shift in his eyes, the crack in his composure. His eyes widened slightly, like he wasn't expecting that response. He had prepared for an emotional outburst, for tears, for anger. But instead, he got calm. Steady, acceptance. He looked away quickly, trying to regain control of the moment. You're okay with this? I nodded, never breaking my gaze. You said you needed space. I'm giving it to you. The silence that followed was thick with confusion. He had expected a battle, a fight, something to make him feel in control. But instead, I gave him nothing. No resistance. No anger. No pain. Just acceptance. I could see the cracks forming in his carefully constructed facade. He wasn't sure how to handle this new version of me. The woman who refused to play the game. He shifted in his seat, glancing nervously at the door, as if looking for an exit from this uncomfortable situation. But there was no escape. He had hung tire. He had stepped into this mess, and now he was going to have to deal with the consequences. As the days passed, it became clear to me that Mason wasn't sure what to do next. He was stuck in his own mind, constantly guessing his choices. His movements became erratic, like he was waiting for a signal, a cue to keep going. But I wasn't going to give him that. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. Every time I saw him, I could see the internal battle waging inside of him. He would look at me with uncertainty, as if waiting for me to fall apart. But I never did. I kept my distance. Both emotionally and physically. I walked through the house like a ghost, silently reclaiming space that had once been shared between us. After dinner, Mason sat down next to me on the couch. His body stiff and uncomfortable. He seemed almost afraid to touch me. As if afraid that any physical contact would cause the house of cards he had built to collapse. He reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing mine for just a moment. Are you sure you're okay? He asked, his voice quiet, almost pleading. I looked at him, feeling a strange sense of detachment. I'm fine, I said, my voice calm. You wanted space. I'm giving it to you. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was trying to figure out what he had done wrong. Why wasn't reacting the way he had expected. But it was too late. The test had already failed. He had pushed too far. He was beginning to see the consequences of his actions. The silence that followed was heavy, full of unspoken words. I had no intention of giving him an answer. No intention of explaining myself. He had to figure this out on his own. He had to face the fact that this game he had started was spiraling out of control. And he was the one who had lost. Mason was caught in his own trap. Now, and all I could do was watch. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to play by his rules. Not anymore. And I wasn't going to beg. Not for him. Not for anyone. The following days felt like a strange kind of waiting game. I was on edge, but I kept it hidden. I didn't let Mason see the cracks forming in me, the quiet ache that had settled in my chest. Every time I saw him trying to act like nothing had changed, it made the weight of the betrayal feel even heavier. I knew he was still trying to keep up the charade, still waiting for me to react. But I refused to give him that satisfaction. If he could push me to the edge and make me beg, He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Mason's behavior grew more erratic as the days wore on. He was qua. He was like he was caught between two worlds, the one where he was still trying to test me, and the one where he was slowly realizing that I wasn't playing by the rules anymore. I saw the way he would look at me, trying to gauge my reaction. But I didn't give him anything. Not even a hint. Not a sigh, not even a glance that might give away what was really going on inside me. Which one length hair. It was like watching someone try to read a book that was written in a language they couldn't understand. One night, as I sat on the couch, reading a book to keep my mind distracted, I felt Mason's presence behind me. I didn't turn around at first, but I could feel his eyes on me. I didn't need to look to know what he was doing. He was waiting for me to make the first move. Hardy was where? Waiting for me to give him the green light to start the conversation. But I wasn't going to do that. Not anymore. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. We know. We need to talk about all this, he said, his voice tight, as if he were struggling to hold on to the last bit of control. I closed the book slowly and turned to face him. What's there to talk about, Mason? I replied, keeping my tone calm. You said you wanted space. You have it?
You're the one.
Who needs to figure things out? Not me. He looked taken aback by my response, like he was expecting me to break, to lose it, to show some sign of distress. Instead, I just sat there, watching him, waiting for him to say what he needed to say. There was a moment of silence before he spoke again, his voice softer this time. I didn't think it would get like this, he said. His eyes, avoiding mine, thought it would be easy. I thought you would show how much you care. His words hit me like a slap, and I felt a surge of frustration well up inside me. I stood up, unable to sit still anymore. You really thought that? I asked, my voice rising despite myself. You thought I would beg for you back like some pathetic fool, just because you tested me? You didn't think it would backfire. He didn't answer at first, just stared at the floor, and that was enough. I didn't need to hear anything else. His silence spoke louder than anything he could say. I turned away from him and walked out of the room, trying to steady my breathing. It wasn't just his betrayal that stung. It was the fact that he had never once believed in me. Not really. Each woman in his family thought love was something to be measured, something that could be quantified by how much pain you could endure. But I wasn't going to be that person anymore. I wasn't going to let him use me like that. The next morning, the silence between us was almost suffocating. We barely spoke. When I did speak, it was only to answer his questions, keeping my responses short and neutral. Woman in his family had ankle-length hair. He couldn't understand what was happening. Couldn't understand why I wasn't falling apart the way he thought I would. Anon had ankle-length hair. It was in those moments that I realized something. I had already started to let go. I had let go of the idea that Mason was the person I thought he was. In his family had ankle-length hair. I let go of the idea that I needed him to love me in the way I had always imagined. He wasn't the man I had married. He had become someone I didn't recognize, and maybe I was starting to become someone he didn't recognize either. The days passed, and it became harder for me to look at him. Every time I saw him, I was reminded the way he had treated me. The way he had let his friends manipulate him. Each woman in his family had ankle-length hair. Dictate the terms of our marriage. I couldn't shake the feeling that the man I had loved had disappeared. And all I was left with was the shell of someone who didn't really know me, didn't trust me, didn't believe in me. And then one night, while his family had ankle-length hair, I found the list. I had been cleaning up in the bedroom when I noticed his phone on the nightstand, the screen glowing faintly in the dark room. I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me to pick it up. My heart pounded in my chest as I unlocked it, my fingers trembling slightly. There it was, list of breakup lines. Not just any lines, but the ones he had planned to use on me. Each woman carefully worded, each one calculated to provoke the exact response he was hoping for. I felt a sickening twist in my stomach as I scrolled through them. I think we need some time apart. One line read, I'm not sure this marriage is what I want anymore. I couldn't believe it. He hadn't been making this up as he went along. He had been rehearsing it, planning it, like it was some kind of performance. I slammed the phone down on the nightstand, my hands shaking. This was it. This was the moment I knew for sure. He didn't love me. Not like I thought. Not like I had believed. Laudlet. As the anger began to rise, something else started to form inside me. A plan. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let him get away with treating me like this. He had pushed me too far. I walked out of the room, my heart pounding, my mind already moving. I had no idea how this was going to end. But one thing was for certain, the test was over. And Mason was about to learn something that he hadn't counted on. The real test was just beginning. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. The weight of the situation had grown too heavy to ignore. The silence between us was unbearable, suffocating, like we were both pretending everything was fine when clearly it wasn't. I had reached my breaking point. Mason was sitting across from me, fiddling with his phone again. As if he didn't realize that I had seen through his act. He thought he was playing it cool. He was playing it cool, waiting for me to crack, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Hemsley had ankle-length hair. I wasn't going to beg him to stay. I wasn't going to fall into his trap. But it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. Do you really think this is going to work? I asked, my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. I had spent too many nights swallowing my anger, letting it simmer under the surface, but not anymore. You can't just fake a breakup and expect me to fall apart the way you want. This is messed up, Mason. His eyes flickered with surprise. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected me to call him out on it. What do you mean? He asked. But the hesitation in his voice told me he knew exactly what I meant. I leaned forward, keeping my gaze locked on his. You've been playing games with me, Mason. How'd ankle-length hair with us? You let your friends convince you that this was okay. And you've been acting like I'm some kind of experiment. You've been testing my loyalty, testing my love. And I'm done with it. His face shifted. The mask of indifference slipping for just a moment. I saw a flicker of guilt, maybe even regret. But it was quickly replaced by defensiveness. I didn't mean for it to get this far, he said. His voice strained. I was just trying to. No. I cut him off, my words sharper now. Don't you dare try to make excuses. You didn't have to go along with this. You didn't get how with this. You didn't have to let them talk you into treating me like this. You didn't have to pretend to break up with me. You could have come to me. Told me what you were feeling. But instead, you chose to manipulate me. You chose to test me like I wasn't enough for you. Mason looked down at his hands, as if trying to avoid my gaze. The silence stretched between us. Thick. With the weight of everything unsaid. But I wasn't going to let him off the hook. Not anymore. I heard everything. I continued, my voice low but steady. I know what you've been planning. I know what your friends told you to do, and I know you're just as guilty as they are for pushing this test on me. Each woman in you think that love can be measured by how much pain you can endure. But you're wrong. You don't get to test me like I'm some project. You don't get to decide how much I care based on how much I'm willing to suffer for you. His head snapped up then, his expression one of confusion mixed with guilt. I never meant to hurt you, he said, his voice softer now. I thought if I pushed you away, I'd see how much you cared. I didn't think it would go like this. Mason, I said. The words coming out more sharply than I intended. Fall out love was something to be tested, something you could measure. But that's not how it works. You can't test love. You can't manipulate it. And you can't make someone prove it. Love is something you build, something you nurture. And you put it through a test, you destroy it. He looked at me then, really looked at me. And I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Regret. Maybe even a little fear. But it was too late for apologies. Too late for excuses. I had already made my decision. You've done enough, I said, standing up from the couch. I'm done playing your game, Mason. If you really think you need space, then take it. But don't expect me to sit around and wait for you to decide what you want. He didn't say anything, just stared at me. His face a mixture of confusion and disbelief. But I didn't care anymore. I had said my piece. I had put my foot down. And now, it was up to him to decide what he wanted. I wasn't going to wait for him to figure it out. As I walked out of the room, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't relief. Exactly. It wasn't even satisfaction. Length hair. It was more like a quiet understanding that I had finally reached the point where I could stop pretending. Each woman in his family had ankle-length hair. I could stop being the woman who would bend to whatever he asked. The woman who would beg for his love. I wasn't going to do that anymore. I wasn't going to beg. Not for him. Not for anyone. The rest of the evening passed in silence. The weight of my words still hanging in the air between us. I could feel Mason's eyes on me every time I walked past him, but I didn't respond. I didn't look at him. I just went about my night. Reclaiming my space, reclaiming my power. And then, the next morning, everything changed. Mason woke up early, the light from the window casting long shadows across the room. He seemed restless, pacing around the house, unsure of what to do. I could see it in the way he moved. The way he glanced at me, but didn't speak. He was trying to figure out what came next, trying to figure out how to fix what he had broken. But the truth was, I wasn't sure it could be fixed. Later that afternoon, he sat down next to me. His posture stiff, almost apologetic. Can we talk? He asked, his voice quiet. I didn't look at him. But I could hear the desperation in his tone. He wanted to fix this. He wanted me to fall back in line. To give him without a fight. But I wasn't sure I could do that anymore. I wasn't sure I could ever go back to pretending that everything was fine. What do you want to talk about? I asked, my voice soft but firm. I wasn't going to let him off the hook so easily. Not this time. I need you to know that I'm sorry. I never should have let it get this far. I messed up. I thought I was doing the right thing. But now I see how wrong I was. I stayed silent. My heart heavy, with a mix of anger and sadness. Was this enough? Was his apology enough to make me trust him again? I didn't know. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about what he had done. It was about what I was willing to accept. And for the first time in a long time, I was beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, I didn't need him to complete me. Maybe I could be whole on my own. And that thought, though scary, felt like freedom. In his family had ankle-length hair. I had spent the last few days pretending like everything was normal, pretending like the air between us wasn't thick with everything unsaid. But deep down, I knew it couldn't last. We were both dancing around the truth. Too afraid to face what had been laid out so clearly in front of us. Hecklin, his family at ankle-length hair, Mason, was still trying to make things work, still clinging to the hope that I'd eventually break, that I'd fall for his test. But he had no idea what was coming. It was Wormler's. Was one of those evenings where the air was crisp. The kind that almost feels like it's alive, like it's holding its breath. Breath before a storm. We were sitting in the living room, ankle-length hair, the quiet punctuated only by the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the occasional distant sound of traffic. Mason was across from me as always, his phone in his hand, his eyes flickering nervously between it and me. He was waiting. I could feel it. I could feel it. I didn't say anything at first, just let the silence stretch out, making him squirm. The tension between us was palpable, thick and suffocating. Then out of nowhere, he looked up at me, his voice tentative. Sarah. I think we need to talk. I didn't respond right away. Just kept my gaze steady on him. I knew what he wanted. I knew he was trying to say something. Trying to make me understand his side of things. But I wasn't going to make it easy for him. I wasn't going to pretend that the past week hadn't changed everything. What is it? Mason. I asked quietly, the calmness in my voice. Stark contrast to the storm inside me. What do you want to talk about? His family had ankle-length hair. He shifted, uncomfortably, his fingers tapping against his phone screen, as if he were trying to gather the right words. He let out a breath, his voice faltering. I know I've messed up. I shouldn't have gone along with it. I thought if I tested you, it would show me how strong our relationship really is. I didn't interrupt him. Though every word felt like a jab to my chest. He was still talking about this like it was some kind of experiment. Like we were two people playing a game. And all of our emotions and trust could be boiled down to a test. The anger inside me was building. But I kept my expression neutral. If he thought this was going to be easy for him, he was wrong. I thought I was doing the right thing. He continued, his voice quieter now. I thought if I pushed you, I'd see how much you cared. How much you loved me. I stood up then, moving slowly. Almost as if I were measuring my every step. And what did you see, Mason? I asked. My voice firm now, no longer soft. What did your test show you? He looked up at me. His face a mixture of guilt and confusion. I don't know. I don't know what it proved. I didn't want to lose you. I shook my head. My chest tight with emotion. That's the thing, Mason. I said, my voice rising slightly. You were never going to lose me. You had me. I was here, all along. But you decided to test it. You thought you could push me, manipulate me, make me prove something. And now you're acting like this is some mistake you can fix. You can't fix this. You can't test love, and then expect everything to be fine. There was a long pause. Uncle length the hair. The weight of my words hanging in the air between us. His eyes were searching mine, looking for something, some sign that I still cared. That I still wanted to fight for us. But the truth was, I wasn't sure anymore. I wasn't sure I could fight for something that had been broken beyond repair. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I never meant for things to get so messed up. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to deal with my own insecurities. I stood there, looking at him, feeling a strange mix of sadness and anger. He was sorry, yes, but it felt like a half-hearted apology. Like he was sorry he got caught. Sorry he had hurt me. But not truly. Sorry for what he had done. For how he had betrayed my trust. And that's what hurt the most. You should have come to me. I said. My voice shaking with the weight of everything I had kept inside. You should have talked to me. But instead, you let your friends tell you what to do. You let them push you into making a decision for both of us. Like you didn't trust me. Like you didn't believe in me. I paused, taking a deep breath. And that's the problem, Mason. You didn't trust me. Not really. You thought you needed to test me. And that's where everything went wrong. Mason's face crumbled at my words. And for the first time, I saw the true depth of his regret. His shoulders slumped, and he looked down at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. I had said everything I needed to say, and now all I could do was wait for him to process it. To understand the weight of what he had done. But there was something else. Something even more painful than his betrayal. It was the realization that, deep down, I had already started to let go. And ankle-length hair. I had already started to close off. To distance myself from him. From us. And no matter how hard I tried to hold on to the past, I couldn't go back to who we were before. The person he had become was not the man I had fallen in love with. The room felt smaller now. The silence between us, thick and uncomfortable. Mason was still sitting there, his hands clenched in his lap. His head down. As if he were waiting for me to say something, to offer some kind of hope. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't give him false hope when I wasn't sure of anything, anymore. I don't know what comes next, Mason, I said quietly. My voice softening. I don't know if we can fix this. But I need time. I need space to figure out what I want, what I need. He nodded slowly, still unable to look me in the eye. I understand, he whispered. And just like that, the conversation was over. He didn't beg. He didn't try to convince me that things would get better. And for the first time in days, I felt a strange sense of relief. Ankle-length of hair. Maybe this was the first step in the process of healing, in moving forward, no matter how hard it was. Aren't you ankle-length hair? But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both lost, adrift in the silence of a love that had been tested too many times. And I wasn't the future held. I wasn't sure what the future held. But I knew that whatever happened, it was time for us to face the truth. We had to stop pretending. The test was over. The days after our conversation felt like they were stretching out into infinity. The silence between Mason and me thick with unspoken words. Polite ankle hair. He had given me space, and I had taken it. But in some ways, the distance between us only seemed to grow. I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about him. It was like I was looking at him through a glass, separated by something I couldn't touch, something I couldn't fix. He was still there, but the man I had married felt like a distant memory. I spent the next few days trying to find some clarity in the chaos of my thoughts. I went on long walks by myself, walking through the park, near our apartment, letting the cool breeze wash over me as I tried to clear my head. Each woman in his family had ankle-length hair. The world around me seemed so much more peaceful than the storm that was brewing inside. I could hear the sounds of people talking, laughing, living their lives, while I was trapped in this quiet uncertainty. Each step felt heavy, like I was moving through mud. And his family had ankle-length hair. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was the one who had been carrying the weight of this relationship. I had always been the one to bend, to adjust, to keep things together. But where had that gotten me? Where had it gotten us? At night I would sit in our empty living room, staring at the walls, trying to make sense of everything. Mason would come home, and we card and mine hair. We would exchange small pleasantries, but there was no real connection. The intimacy we once shared felt like a distant memory, a part of the past that no longer belonged to either of us. He would sit on the couch, his eyes flicking to his phone, as if the world outside of us was more important than the space we had once filled together. I knew he was still struggling with his choices, still questioning what had gone wrong. But he hadn't changed. He hadn't admitted to the full extent of his actions. And that was what weighed most heavily on me. He had apologized, yes, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. One afternoon, I met up with Jessica for coffee. She had been my sounding board through all of this. The one person I could talk to without feeling judged or misunderstood. As soon as I sat down across from her, I could see the concern in her eyes. His family had ankle-length hair. She had been following the tension between Mason and me from the sidelines, and it was clear she wanted to ask, but she was holding back. So how's it going? She asked, her voice tentative. I sighed, stirring my coffee slowly. It's not getting better. Not yet. It feels like we're stuck. Like I'm waiting for him to wake up, but I don't know if he will. I don't know if I can wait much longer. Jessica nodded. Taking a sip of her drink. You don't have to wait, Sarah. You've already been through enough. If he's not ready to face what he's done, maybe it's time to stop waiting for him. Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was right, of course. I didn't owe him this. I didn't owe him my patience, my forgiveness. Not until he truly earned it. But there was still a part of me that held on, still a part of me that wanted to believe in the man he used to be, the man I thought he was. Maybe you're right, I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. But it's hard. I don't know how to let go of something I've invested so much in. Jessica reached across the table, placing her hand on mine. Letting go doesn't mean giving up, Sarah. It means giving yourself the space to breathe. To figure out what you really need, without him telling you what you should be. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Hulathaneng's hair. I had spent so long living in the shadows of Mason's expectations, wondering if I was enough, trying to prove myself. But, maybe, it was time to start thinking about what I needed, not what he needed. Later that evening, I sat in the living room again, my mind racing with everything Jessica had said. I could hear Mason moving around the house, but I didn't go to him. I Stayed where I was, staring out the window at the fading light of the day. The city below was quiet, almost peaceful. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something. Indecision I had to make felt bigger than I could handle, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending like nothing had changed. Each woman in it keep holding onto a version of Mason that didn't exist anymore. I needed to take control. To stop waiting for him to fix things. When Mason finally came into the room, I looked up at him, meeting his eyes for the first time in days. There was something different in his expression, something I couldn't quite place. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice tentative. I took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "Yes," I said. "Why need to talk?" He sat down beside me, his eyes searching mine, like he was trying to figure out what I was thinking. I wasn't sure I knew myself, but I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice steady despite the shaking in my chest. "And I don't know if we can fix this. Mason. I don't know if you can fix what's been broken." He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired. I've spent so much time trying to hold this together, trying to prove to you that I'm worth something, worth your trust. But I can't do it anymore." The silence between us was heavy, but I didn't look away. I couldn't afford to back down now. "I need to know if you're really ready to fix this," I continued. "Because right now, each woman all I see is a man who's more concerned with keeping his pride than understanding what he's done." Mason looked at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't read. Guilt, maybe. Regret. But it was too little. Too late. He had made his choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. "I don't know if I can fix this," he whispered, his voice breaking. "But I want to try." I didn't say anything at first. I didn't know what to say. Ian and his family had ankle-length hair. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that we could find our way back to each other. But the other part of me knew that some things couldn't be repaired. Some things were too broken to fix. "I'm not sure I can keep waiting," I said quietly, my heart heavy with the truth. "I can't keep waiting for you to decide what you want. I need to know if you know. To know if you're ready to fight for this. Because I'm tired of fighting alone." He didn't answer right away, and I wasn't sure if he could. But the words had been said. Each woman in his family had ankle-length hair, and now I was left with the knowledge that the next steps we took would either bring us closer together or tear us further apart. And for the first time, I wasn't sure which path I was willing to walk. It had been a few weeks since that conversation. Each would have length hair. Since the moment I had finally let go, taken the step away from Mason, away from everything that had been broken between us. The silence that followed was deafening at first, but as time went on, it became something else, something almost peaceful. The tension I had carried for so long started to dissipate, replaced by a quiet acceptance. I wasn't sure if I had made the right choice. But I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadows of someone else's insecurities. And Mason had made his attempts to reach out to talk about what had happened, but every conversation seemed to circle back to the same thing. Him apologizing, me listening, but neither of us really moving forward. It wasn't that I didn't care about him. I did, once. But I had changed. And he had changed. The person he was, the person I had loved, wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't about the breakup anymore. It wasn't even about the test. he had put me through. It was about the fact that we had lost each other. And maybe we never truly knew each other in the way we thought we did. I spent more time with myself, rediscovering parts of me that I had forgotten. I visited places I hadn't been in years. Walks by the river. Took walks by the river, sat in cafes, where I would get lost in my thoughts. In the pages of books I hadn't had the time to read. I wasn't running from my problems. I was learning to be okay with them, learning to be okay with who I had become. I was alone, but for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace in that solitude. One morning, I woke up and the first thing that hit me was how light I felt. And his family had ankle-length hair. There had been a weight on my shoulders for so long that I didn't realize how heavy it had been until it was gone. Hitfully called the hair. I had stopped thinking about what Mason was doing. Stopped wondering whether he had changed. Stopped waiting for Lynn. Stopped waiting for him to show up and prove something to me. I had nothing to prove to him. I had nothing to prove to anyone. I was walking through the park one day when I bumped into Jessica. She smiled at me, but there was something different in her eyes. Something I couldn't quite place. And which were there for had been there for me through all of this, had listened to me vent, gave me the space I needed. But now she was seeing me differently. Different, she said, her voice soft, almost in awe. I stopped walking and turned to face her. Do I? Yeah, she said, her smile widening. You seem lighter. More like yourself again. It felt good to hear that. It felt good to know that I wasn't just pretending anymore. Each woman had ankle-length hair. That the journey I had been on was starting to show in the way I carried myself. I guess I'm starting to find myself again, I said, the words feeling true in a way I hadn't expected. I don't feel like I'm lost anymore. She nodded, her expression softening. You're not. You never were. You just had to realize it. I felt a lump form in my throat at her words, the emotion rising up unexpectedly. The validation from someone who knew me so well, who had seen me at my lowest, made it all feel real. It made everything feel worth it. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet reflection and gentle revelations. Hey, I began to see that my path wasn't about finding closure with Mason or getting him to understand what he had done. It was about me. About learning to be whole again. And every small step I took in that direction made me feel more and more like I was moving forward. Even if it wasn't in the way I had expected. Then, one evening, Mason came by the apartment. I hadn't seen him in days. And I wasn't sure what to expect. When ankle-length hair. When I opened the door, I saw the familiar face that I once knew so well, but now it seemed like a stranger's. His eyes were filled with a mixture of guilt and something else. Something I hadn't seen in him for a long time. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, he began, his voice quiet, hesitant. And I realize now that I was wrong. I shouldn't have done what I did. I shouldn't have tested you. I hurt you. And I'm sorry. I never meant to make you feel like you were something to be measured. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him, letting his words sink in. This was the moment. The moment where he either proved to me that he had learned from his mistakes, or the moment where I saw that nothing had really changed. You're sorry, I finally said, my voice steady but soft. But it's too late for that now. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. Mason, I'm not angry with you anymore. I'm not even disappointed. I can't keep holding on to something that's gone. You can't fix what's already broken. Lin Kaiflu and ankle Klan. On his face was painful. Like he had just realized the truth of my words. It wasn't that I wanted him to suffer. Hud ankle Langka. I knew I couldn't keep living in a place where I was waiting for someone else to decide my worth. If I had had ankle-length hair, I had spent so many years trying to prove it to him, to make him see me for who I really was. But now I saw that I had already proven everything I needed to prove. To myself. I understand. He whispered, his voice cracking. I nodded, stepping back slightly. Maybe one day we can be friends. But not right now. Not until we both figure out who we are, apart from each other. He nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and acceptance. I hope you find what you're looking for. Sarah. I really do. I closed the door softly behind him and leaned against it for a moment. My heart heavy with everything that had passed. But as I stood there, I realized something. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was free. Free to be myself. Free to move forward, without any of the weight I had carried for so long. I had started this journey feeling broken. But now I could see the pieces of me coming back together. I had learned to let go, and in that letting go, I had found strength I didn't know I had. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most important lesson of all. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Hair. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what it might bring. I was ready. And that, I realized, was enough.